Have you ever encountered something so strange, so unexplainable, that it left you questioning everything? Friends, this is Jake, and today I'm going to take you through 3 chilling stories of bizarre encounters, where reality and the supernatural collide. Buckle up, because these stories will haunt you long after the video ends.
Story 1, Coyote Desert Encounter.
I've always lived in Ashford Ridge, a small, quiet town where nothing much ever happens. The kind of place where everybody knows everyone's business, but the real drama usually stays under the surface. Honestly, I never really minded it, until recently. After my breakup, everything felt heavier, like the world was pressing down on me just a little too hard. The only thing keeping me going was my grandmother's old spiritual teachings. She always told me that peace could be found if you look hard enough. So, in the wake of my grandfather's death, I started going to church with her every Sunday, hoping for something, anything, that could ease the pain. Then, one Sunday, something unexpected happened. I walked into the church like I always did, with my mind miles away. But there she was, Lila. She was sitting alone in the back pew, this mysterious vibe surrounding her, like she didn't quite belong, but somehow still did. Her eyes met mine, and it felt like the air shifted. We struck up a conversation after the service, and it was different. I don't know how to explain it, but we just clicked. She had this way of talking that made me feel like I could finally breathe again. We exchanged numbers, and that was the start of it. Soon I found myself texting her late at night, pouring out thoughts I didn't even know I had. It felt like I was building something real. As we talked more, I realized there was so much more to Lila than I first thought. She told me about her chaotic family, the constant emotional roller coaster that had scarred her. I could tell she wasn't just talking to talk. She was opening up, letting me into her world, something I never expected. One evening, we decided to go out for dinner. It was quiet, just the 2 of us, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. The night was perfect. It felt like the start of something special, something real, something I hadn't felt in so long. But little did I know that night was the beginning of something much darker. It was a little after 11 p.m. and the moonlight barely lit the deserted road as I drove Lila back to her place. We'd been laughing about something stupid. One of those conversations where everything feels easy and safe. But then, out of nowhere, she went quiet. Dead quiet. I glanced over and her eyes were locked on something outside the window, wide and unblinking. Before I could say anything, she started mumbling, no, chanting, in a language I couldn't recognize. Her voice was low, almost guttural, like it didn't belong to her. My chest tightened as her words grew louder, faster, and more intense. "Lila," I said, my voice cracking. "Lila, are you okay?" She didn't even flinch. It was like she wasn't there anymore. Panicking, I slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, fumbling to dial for help. But just as I hit call, Lila let out this bone-chilling scream, so loud and raw it felt like it pierced straight through me. Before I could stop her, she yanked open the car door and bolted into the dark woods. "Lila!" I shouted, my voice echoing into the silence. I jumped out and ran after her, but it was like she vanished into thin air. The trees swallowed her whole. I don't know how long I searched, but it felt like hours. I screamed her name until my throat burned, stumbling through the thick forest with nothing but my phone's flashlight to guide me. The only sound was the crunch of my footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. No sign of her, not even a footprint. When I finally gave up and returned to the car, my hands were freezing and my mind was racing. What the hell just happened? Was she in trouble? Was she even real? The police didn't take me seriously when I reported her missing. She probably just needed some space, they said. But I knew better. Whatever happened that night wasn't normal. Days turned into weeks and there was no trace of Lila. No calls, no texts, no closure. Just silence. Her face haunted my dreams, her voice whispering in that strange otherworldly language. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to, that maybe Lila wasn't just a girl with a troubled past. And even now, every time I drive down that road, I can't help but glance at the edge of the forest, wondering if she's still out there, watching.
Story 2, Trapped in Redwood.
I've always been a fan of solo road trips. Something about the open road and the endless horizon makes it feel like you're escaping everything for a while. So when life got a little too messy, I packed up my old beater car and headed out to the Coyote Desert. The plan was simple: drive to Riverside Junction, crash with my buddy there, and hopefully clear my head in the process. The desert stretched out endlessly, barren and lifeless, but strangely peaceful. My car's wipers barely worked, squeaking against the glass, but it didn't bother me. Not much rain in the desert anyway, right? At least, that's what I thought. The calm didn't last long. Out of nowhere, the sky darkened like someone flipped a switch. Lightning slashed across the horizon, followed by a deafening boom of thunder that rattled my car. And then, the rain came. Heavy sheets of it, like the sky was falling apart. The wipers couldn't keep up, and I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. "Great," I muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. The road was quickly turning into a blur, and the idea of hydroplaning in the middle of nowhere wasn't exactly appealing. Reluctantly, I pulled over to the side of the road, my headlights barely illuminating the endless stretch of wet asphalt. The storm raged around me, the car rocking slightly with each gust of wind. It felt like I was completely alone out there, just me and the chaos outside. Or so I thought. That's when it started. This feeling, it was like something was crawling under my skin, urging me to leave the safety of the car. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to nerves, but the sensation only grew stronger. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a pull. Before I knew it, I was outside, soaked to the bone as the rain pounded down. The cold hit me like a slap, but the pull didn't stop. I walked a few steps away from the car, my sneakers squelching in the mud, and peered through the storm. Then I saw them. Strange, flickering lights in the distance, weaving and darting like fireflies, but way too big for fireflies. They were getting closer, fast. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out the thunder. Panic set in, and without thinking, I bolted toward a nearby boulder and crouched behind it. The wind howled around me, but all I could focus on were those lights, now just beyond the car. They flickered and swirled, almost like they were searching for something. Or someone. I held my breath, praying they'd disappear, but deep down I knew this storm wasn't natural, and whatever those lights were, they weren't either. I was still crouched behind the boulder, my breath shallow, my clothes drenched and clinging to me. The lights stopped moving. They hovered near my car, flickering faintly through the storm, and for a brief moment I thought maybe I was imagining all of it. Maybe it was just the storm playing tricks on me. But then I saw them, 3 dark figures stepping into the glow of my car's headlights. They moved with purpose, their flashlights cutting through the rain as they scanned the area. My stomach dropped. Who the hell were they? And why were they out here in the middle of nowhere? I couldn't make out their faces, just their silhouettes. But there was something unsettling about the way they moved, slow, deliberate, like they weren't in any kind of rush. Then, without warning, one of them raised his arm. Bang! The gunshot cracked through the air, louder than the thunder, and I nearly screamed. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slick and unsteady. I managed to dial 911, whispering as quietly as I could to the operator. "There are people out here. They have a gun. Please, send someone. Hurry!" The seconds dragged like hours. The figures moved closer to the boulder where I was hiding. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. One of them muttered something, but the storm swallowed their words. Another flashed his light toward the boulder, and I ducked, pressing myself against the cold, wet rock. Just when I thought I was done for, distant sirens pierced through the chaos. Red and blue lights cut through the darkness, and the figures froze. One of them barked something, and all three bolted into the desert, disappearing into the storm like shadows melting into the night. When the police found me, I was a mess, soaked, shaking, and barely able to string together a coherent sentence. They searched the area but found nothing. No sign of the men. No footprints. Just me sitting in the mud, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. That night changed everything for me. I haven't been on a solo road trip since, and I don't think I ever will. Every time I see a thunderstorm, I'm reminded of those figures, their flashlights, and that gunshot echoing in my head. I tried to move on, but sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, thinking about what would have happened if the cops hadn't shown up. Who were they? Why were they out there? And worst of all, were they even human? The desert has a way of keeping its secrets, and now I think it's better that way. Some things aren't meant to be understood, but one thing's for sure, there's something out there in the Coyote Desert, something I'll never forget, something I hope I never see again.
Story 3: The Minivan Mystery.
The trip from Brooksville to New Haven was supposed to be simple. Just me, Jesse, and an old playlist of nostalgic throwback hits to get us through the long stretches of empty road. Somewhere along the way, the GPS suggested a detour through a little town called Redwood Hollow. It looked cute enough, like one of those places you'd see in a postcard. Cobblestone streets, vintage lampposts, and neat little shops with hand-painted signs. Jesse thought it was the perfect spot to stretch our legs. But the second we stepped out of the car, something about the air felt wrong. It was quiet. Too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that makes you feel like someone's watching you from a distance. Jesse brushed it off, laughing about how I always overthink everything. But I couldn't shake the feeling. We ducked into a convenience store for snacks, and that's when it started to get weird. Behind the counter was a woman with short blonde hair and a bored expression, scrolling on her phone. She didn't say a word, just glanced at us like we were intruding on her personal time. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then, as I grabbed a water bottle, it hit me. I'd seen her earlier. Same woman, same outfit, same everything, except it wasn't here. It was hours ago, back at a gas station we'd stopped at for coffee. "Do you, have a twin?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. The cashier froze for a second, her eyes snapping up to meet mine. "No," she said flatly, "I don't." Her tone was cold, clipped, like she was daring me to press further. Jesse gave me a confused look, and I quickly shook my head, dropping it. But as we left, I couldn't stop glancing back at her. Her eyes followed us all the way out, her expression completely blank, almost like she wasn't real. By the time we got back on the road, I was already on edge. Jesse tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but I wasn't really listening. Something wasn't adding up, and I couldn't get that cashier's face out of my head. We pulled into another gas station a little later to fill up, but when we arrived, the place was completely deserted. Not a single car, not even an attendant. The pumps looked old, rusted like they hadn't been used in years. Creepy much, Jessie joked, but I could tell she was uneasy too. As I started pumping gas, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. Turning, I saw people. Out of nowhere, the station was suddenly full. Men, women, even kids, all standing there, staring at us. None of them said a word. They just watched. Jessie opened her door and leaned out. Hi?" she called nervously, but no one responded. My heart was racing. Something wasn't right. The way they stood there, perfectly still, perfectly silent, it felt like we'd stumbled into some kind of nightmare. I slammed the gas cap shut and jumped back into the car. "Drive," I whispered, my voice trembling. Jessie didn't hesitate. As we peeled out of the station, I couldn't help but look in the rearview mirror. They were still standing there, their eyes fixed on us, even as we disappeared down the road. And that's when I knew. We weren't just passing through Redwood Hollow. We were trapped in it. Jessie was gripping the wheel tighter than usual, her knuckles pale against the dark leather. Neither of us had said much since we left Redwood Hollow. The air inside the car felt heavy, like we'd carried something out of that town that didn't want to let us go. That's when we saw it. A weathered, beat-up minivan chugging along the highway. It passed us, its faded green paint scratched and peeling, the windows too dark to see inside. It didn't seem strange at first, just another car on the road. But then, 15 minutes later, it passed us again. "Isn't that the same van?" I asked, sitting up straighter. Jessie glanced at me, her brows furrowing. "No way. It's just a coincidence." Except it wasn't. Another 20 minutes passed, and there it was again. Same van, same peeling paint, same dark windows. This time, Jessie slowed down to let it pass, and we both leaned forward to get a good look. "What the hell?" Jessie muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the exact same van. The license plate was smudged with dirt, but the numbers were clear enough to recognize. My stomach twisted. We hadn't stopped, we hadn't turned around. How was this possible? An hour later, it passed us a fourth time. My hands were trembling, and Jessie's breathing had grown shallow, like she was trying to stay calm, but couldn't. The road stretched endlessly ahead of us. No turns, no intersections, just straight highway. And yet, somehow, the van kept looping back like time itself was breaking apart. "Keep driving," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't stop, just keep going." Jessie nodded, her eyes glued to the road. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if we stopped, if we pulled over, even for a second, the van wouldn't just pass us again. It would stop too. By the time we finally reached New Haven, the sun was rising. The glow of the morning felt surreal, like we'd been driving through a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. Jessie parked outside her cousin's apartment, and we both just sat there for a moment, staring blankly out the windshield. Do you think we imagined it?" Jessie finally asked, her voice soft and uncertain. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to. The memory of the van, the staring people at the gas station, that eerie cashier, it all felt too vivid to be a hallucination. But at the same time, it was too impossible to be real. We didn't talk about Redwood Hollow again after that day. Not because we forgot, but because some things are better left alone. And even now, whenever I'm on the highway and see an old minivan, my chest tightens. Because deep down, I know some roads don't just take you places. Sometimes they trap you in them. If this story gave you chills and made you question reality, hit that like button and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a bizarre road trip experience or passed through a town that felt off? We'd love to hear your stories. Don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling tales and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. Remember, not every road leads you home. Sometimes it leads you somewhere else. Stay safe out there.